this is follow-up on what the chairman was talking about in terms of plutonium, and this is at Oak Ridge National Lab, right? Plutonium, the 238 production, right?
I will take it for the record
Right,
to find
yeah.
out exactly where
So
it's done.
I think
I
that
should
'cause
know, but I don't.
I've done some work in this space, and I think that you're correct that NASA is the only consumer, but it is a commitment on DOE's part to make sure that you have what you need. But let me go to the big aspiration here, which is flight into deep space, out of lower Earth orbit for humans. And you talked about the great work that's being done now on the launch system and where you are. There's some sense, and it's only because of your success, that perhaps we can move the timetable in it. And maybe that's not the case, and these are probably people who are not as intimately familiar with the work that you're doing. But if you could comment for a minute on how you see the timeline, that would be good.
Congressman, I will do my best. The president has set a rough outline for us in demanding that we provide a way to put humans with an asteroid in by 2025, but most importantly, that we be on Mars or in the Martian system in the 2030s. And that is with that direction in mind and the agreement by the Congress, bipartisan agreement by the Congress, we have a program, a long-range program in existence today to which we're marching, and that calls for several things. America is still the leader in space, and I'm glad to hear members of the committee acknowledge that, because it's important for all of us to understand that. There is no close competitor, to be quite honest. But in order for us to stay the leader in space, there are a number of things we have to do, and deep space exploration is one of them, but we have to make sure that we have a very robust low Earth orbit infrastructure that will be run by American industry eventually, or non-government entities. And so critical to that is the completion of the commercial crew program that we now have scheduled to actually fly in 2017. We have brought about commercial cargo, and that has proven to be successful. And I think by the end of this year, you will see how resilient it is when Orbital Sciences flies a Cygnus on a vehicle other than their own vehicle. So when you're buying a service and the service provider provides it, even when a part of their system goes away, that talks about resilience.
Well, I was on the floor of SpaceX out in California looking as they put the Falcon 9 together. And it is amazing that this industry that NASA has spawned is so robust now. And you have Boeing, you have SpaceX, low Earth orbit, the commercial crew. What's in the president's budget is 1.2, I think, 4, right?
Yes, sir.
$1.24 billion.
You go one digit farther than I can go. Is that sufficient to continue to, and then you have some other pieces of that. You have the Advanced Exploration System at about 238, and then you have the Opportunity Flight Program, which is another opportunity to seed this industry at, I think, 15 plus. So can you talk about whether that's sufficient to do this, the work that needs to be done in lower Earth orbit, so that you can focus on, and the committee really likes to talk about going to Mars. Asteroids, not really, I think, the thing that grabs our attention in total. That's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Administrator. Yeah.
Congressman Fattah, I appreciate your reference to the total picture, because that's what's really important. And I talked about commercial crew and cargo. $1.2 billion that we requested in the 2016 budget for commercial crew is essential if we are to bring in the two providers with their capability to carry crew to orbit by 2017. The second leg of the stool is actually the International Space Station. And that is an area that I need to ensure that we don't shortchange, that we don't look at it as a bank and begin to pull money out of the International Space Station and International Space Station operations, because when we use it as a bank, usually the first place we go is cargo flights, fewer cargo flights, which could eventually put the crew in jeopardy because we're not able to get stuff there. The third leg that you refer to is SLS and Orion, and that is what, once we have a robust low Earth orbit environment, then we use SLS and Orion to take us, first of all, back to cislunar space. That's around the moon over the 10-year period of the 20s. So beginning in the earliest part that we can of the 20s, we'll put Orion on the SLS and send it to cislunar space for multiple flights, and then on to Mars. So it's the three-legged stool that's absolutely critical that you talk about.
Red light's on, but if the chairman would yield for just, I think you got the Russians' attention in some other respects. They took a decision this week to announce that they were joining a decision that you had already made a year or so ago about extending the life and their presence in cooperation relative to the International Space Station. Could you just share with the committee where we are with all of our international partners now that Russia has made this decision?
And I would just caution, what you hear coming out of Russia is not always what they intended to say. I am encouraged that that they now have, in fact, in their reorganization, because they're going through reorganization just as we are, they now have what's called the Roscosmos Science and Technology Council. So that's a brand new entity that was put in place when they put Roscosmos under the umbrella of their whole space industry organization, and it's much more complicated than I want to try to explain to people. We were encouraged when Yuri Kopchev, who I consider to be, because he is a former colleague of mine, who I
You
consider...
did mission with him, right?
No, this is not the astronaut. This was the former head of the Russian Space Agency, of Roscosmos, and it was Mr. Kopchev who actually could be considered the Russian father of the International Space Station, because he and a predecessor of mine, Dan Golden, were the two people who were most responsible for getting the station started, if you will. But he is the head of the Science and Technology Council, and it was that council that met and said that it was their position that Russia should remain committed to the International Space Station, and that they should remain committed through 2024 before they go off and start talking about taking pieces off and establishing their own low Earth orbit infrastructure. So I think that's what you referred to. I would say one more thing, because you commented about international partners. Everyone should take note of the 3 spacewalks that were completed this past week. Butch Wilmore and Terry Virts did 3 absolutely amazing spacewalks, which in themselves were great.
For 5 hours?
They were long. Each of them was in the neighborhood of 6 to 8 hours. But what was most important was that completed the installation of the International Docking Adapter, which is it gives the International Space Station now the capability of accepting any vehicle from any partner that wants to bring crew to the International Space Station. So we're now ready to receive. There may be a few puts and takes we've got to do, but the station is now ready to receive Boeing, SpaceX, any American company that wants to fly a vehicle to the International Space Station. And the international part I wanted to point out for everybody, the IV crew member, and I've been one, that's the hardest thing on the whole thing. The IV crew member, the person inside choreographing all 3 spacewalks, was Samantha Cristoforetti, who is an Italian astronaut. So if you don't think that our partners are doing their part and that they're excited about this, that was a true international effort to set up American industry to be able to service the International Space Station with crews, and that was incredible. So
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for yielding for those additional few.
We recognize Mr. Jenkins at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Administrator. I'm from down in the home of the Rocket Boys in Homer Hickam, West Virginia. So